Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Wells here. We're going to start our first video. It's going to be a brief history of theater. We're going to start with the dawn of theater. And we're not going to get into heavy details. We're not going to hit every specific area of history. My goal here is to really just give you an idea of how drama or theater has evolved from its most basic primitive form to now, to drama now. So we're going to start with the beginning. It's with the primitive people. You know, drama was born out of a series of tribal communities all around the world. And how it was born was out of an instinctive rhythmic movement or like an inner movement that people naturally felt with their bodies. And they would present this movement, and everybody else would begin to mimic that movement. And this style of dance eventually evolved into pantomimes. And pantomimes are specific movements that are done over and over again that tell a variety of tribal traditions or even ritual rites of passages. These dances were considered initiation dances for a number of reasons. To give you examples, I have listed boys approaching manhood. That was a big deal. War dances to create bravery or stir courage within young warriors who didn't have enough experience in battle as the elder tribesmen did. Or even story dances to recreate events of a hunt or retell a story of a great battle. That's so unique because that keeps history within tribes. That's how they kept history alive within their village. Also, another really huge one is religious dances that would pacify or would calm or satisfy a numerous amount of unseen spirits that these tribes believed controlled the world, that actually controlled the environment around them. So, off of number four, those religious dances eventually evolved into rituals. And you can still see some of these tribal rituals today in areas such as South Africa or Australia. With the Aborigines in Australia, they do a lot of ritual, or even closer to home. If you think about Hawaii, if y'all see the hula dance, that hula dance is not just meant to look pretty. It is pretty, but it actually, those hand movements tell a story. And hopefully, if we have time in class, we can watch one of those videos to get a better idea of how that story is told. So, what did some of these ritual ceremonies look like? A lot of the primitive forms of these ritual ceremonies would begin with a chief representative, and that would be like a shaman, a priest, or a witch doctor, and they would have a mask. Now you got to remember mask because mask is going to keep coming back. These masks were believed to have powerful magic. You know, the mask would be held out, and somebody, that chief representative, would get that mask and become the most powerful man in the tribe. And that person would pray, chant, and dance in an attempt to drive away evil spirits. A very aggressive form of dancing that looked crazy. And the rest of the tribe would watch, and even the other tribesmen would get up and assist in this ritual by going a circle around the flame, while the shaman or witch doctor or whoever with the mask on um, would dance in a way to scare away these evil spirits. So we have this primitive form of drama that started with internal rhythmic movements and has gone all the way to religious ritual dancing. Okay? Let's remember this because we're about to move into Greek theater. Now, Greek theater uh, began first with ritual rites, or with religious rites or religious ceremonies that would actually pay homage to the god of wine and fertility, or the Dionysus, the god Dionysus. So instead of driving away evil spirits, these rituals were meant to worship and honor this god. So there was a lot of dancing, there was a lot of singing of hymns, and these hymns were called dithyrambs that were meant to honor the god of wine and fertility. So these hymns became really popular. They became so popular that choral groups were formed uh, and would compete in vocal competitions. Each choir had its own composer that would write these dithyrambs and would sing. It was a huge deal. And so, out of these rituals, out of these vocal competitions, out of everything so far, developed something known as a tragedy. And that literally means goat song. The Greek root of tragedy is tragos, which tragos means goat song. Now, but there's a lot of arguing between scholars about whether or not uh, they know what tragedy means. Some people believe that uh, the reason why it's goat song is because the men in the chorus would stand a semicircle, and there'd be an altar right in front of them, and those men would be wearing goat pants, looking like minotaurs, and then there'd be a goat skin right on the altar. And there's another group that believes that once this ritual was before it completely ended, at the very end, they would sacrifice a goat. All right, I honestly believe that all of that occurred. I literally believe that men would stand in a chorus dressed like minotaurs, singing dithyrambs or choruses in honor to Dionysus around an altar with a goat skin, sacrificing a goat. And as soon as that sacrifice happened, they'd be off doing their merry thing. So to progress, these rituals became popular with the competitions, with the tragedies, with the minotaurs. Everything became so popular that they created something known as a festival of tragedies that occurred within the city of Dionysia, which is an area within Athens. And it took place in the springtime. And it was so popular that it was considered a national and religious holiday that would last about 5 to 6 days. Now, to give you an idea about this holiday, like businesses would close shop, and everybody in the surrounding area would come to this amphitheater within the city of Dionysia that seated over 20,000 people. This was made, I'll give you a date, 400 BC. They created an amphitheater out of the side of a mountain that sat 20,000 people. And if you couldn't afford a ticket to get inside this thing, the state would actually pay your entrance fee. So this, remember, at 400 BC. I mean, does anybody pay for you to go to a Grizzlies game? I wish someone paid for me too. So out of those 3 days, out of those 5 to 6 days, 3 of those days were reserved for the actual play contest. So that's what took place at the Festival of Tragedies. They would bring in 3 contestants that would compete to be the winner of the Festival of Tragedies. And this is how it went. There'd be 3 days of those 6, and the first day would be a trilogy and tragedies from one person. So 3 tragedies in all, and then a 4th satire comedy. And this would happen for each contestant. They would get their 3 tragedies and a satire comedy. And the winner of the Festival of Tragedies, would have the honor of wearing the ivy garland. And they would also prance around with the person who paid for them to do all of this. So who were the people that won this competition? Well, it was lots of different playwrights, but we're going to focus on just a handful: Thespis, Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, Aristophanes, and Menander. And they all wrote tragedies based on ancient myths, and these are stories that everybody knew. So let's start with Thespis. So he was actually the first person to ever win the Festival of Tragedies. And he won by a landslide because he introduced the first Greek actor. So remember we talked about these Greek choruses that were dressed like minotaurs that would sing these songs? Well, Thespis created an actor that stepped out and spoke to the audience, and then the chorus would sing in response. So that was a huge deal because that had never ever been done before. Remember, it was just men sitting around singing songs. Well, Thespis says, "Well, hey, how about we have a guy step out and speak to the crowd?" And he did, and so he won the first festival. Of course, his name is Thespius, and when he won, he traveled around all through Greece, showing everybody his great play because it was so fresh and so cool that he wanted to show everybody. And so, because of that, the people that were part of his troupe, his band of actors, they were known as thespians, which we use as a term for actors today. Another person is Aeschylus, and he's considered the father of tragedy. He introduced the second actor. He reduced the number of within the chorus from 50 to 12. And he also won the Festival of Tragedies about 13 times. And what made him really unique, besides the second actor, which was fresh and cool, and the reduction of the chorus, which had never been seen before, he loved spectacles. And one thing he did was he gave the Furies, which were actually spirits of revenge, who would actually chase down those who did not atone for their sins. So if you did something wrong and never wanted to be redeemed for it, these little Furies would chase you down. Well, he put masks on them that were so frightening that it would scare women and children. It would terrorize them. Um, and so if you have a younger brother or a sister, and you know that they have nightmares at night, you can imagine back in 400 BC, these kids having nightmares about people with masks on. Then we have Sophocles. He's another great guy. He was actually well educated. He was a man of a lot of talents. He was a singer. He was a musician. He was an athlete. He was so smart that he actually became the treasurer of Athens. One thing he did was he introduced a third actor, okay, and he made the chorus, instead of 12, he kind of bumped it up to 15 people, and he won the Festival of Tragedies about 18 times. Now, one thing that's not in the PowerPoint is that he wrote over 100 tragedies, and out of those 100, 7 of them remained. And people that read those, scholars, consider his work to be the essence, like the pinnacle of great Greek drama. And if you have time, if you like reading Greek drama, I recommend reading Electra. That is the epitome of his work, just to give you an idea. Now, Euripides. He was unique. He was great at boxing and painting, but he was also an unorthodox thinker. He questioned a lot of tradition, and he questioned a lot of religion. So one thing he did that questioned tradition was he stepped out of traditional ancient myths as far as focusing on the surface. He took these ancient myths and he began to emphasize on the psychological motivation behind things. So there's a word within Greek drama called hubris, and it's your hubris that drives you to make terrible choices. And hubris is your pride. It's what drives you to want to be something, and it's your motivation. Like if your best friend is the manager at a store you work at, and you want to be the manager, your jealousy is your hubris at that point. You are driven by that to become the store manager. So no matter what you do, you are going to do whatever it takes to get that and to think about yourself. And to get that, he took the psychological motivation. That's when we began to see dramas that deal with jealousy, lying, hating, that sort of thing. So Euripides is really honored with humanizing drama. And of course, outside of drama, if you notice, we have to have our comedy just to relieve the tension just a little bit. You had Aristophanes and Menander, and they were comic writers. So Aristophanes is considered the finest comic writer of Greece. He wrote a lot about public life. He would insult public figures. He did something known as satire, comedy. Um, so if you're famous and you went to a show by Aristophanes, you would probably expect to have your name mentioned a lot. Menander, on the other hand, took his focus away from the public sector to really the domestic area. A lot of private life stuff was mentioned in this. It was a lot of situational comedy. Um, I wrote archetypes and then dot 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 farce. It took me about, I don't know, 10 minutes to think about that word. It's kind of hard. But farce is the form of creating stock characters um, and creating archetypes, which we'll later kind of go further into detail. But just to give you an idea, it's if you see a lot of old cartoons like Bullwinkle, I can't remember his name, but there's the typical evil character, and then there's the person who does the good stuff. Um, those are archetypes. You traditionally have a look. They look evil. They wear black, and the good person usually wears bright colors like red and blue. Um, those would be kind of what Menander did, and he would move from all these different characters. But just so you know, we move into the text that moves into Roman theater, but Roman theater isn't really important to me because Romans just really kind of plundered through Greece, ended up stealing what the Greeks did and using it in their theater. So next time we have a video, it's going to be part 2. So hope you enjoy it.